You already know what's going on, man. Attitude Era Podcast. We are back in the building with another episode of Double Up. I need everybody that's watching this episode of Double Up, please tune in this Sunday, 3 p.m. Eastern Time. Our biggest interview yet will be dropping on the YouTube channel. We'll be premiering it. It is with the legendary, the best there ever was, the best there ever is, the best there ever will be, BRET, the Hitman Hart, the Attitude Era Podcast. Got a 20-minute interview with Bret Hart this Sunday at 3 p.m. Eastern Time. Make sure y'all tap into the YouTube and y'all watch the interview. We're going to be in the chat, commenting with y'all, reacting with y'all as this interview drops. Make sure y'all like, y'all share, y'all hit the notifications on the Attitude Era Podcast. If you haven't, if you're somebody that's just scrolling by seeing this video, do not leave. Don't make this your first and last time here. Subscribe to the channel, turn them notifications on. Sign up to the Patreon also. That's where you get all the behind the scenes, all the never seen footage, all the early access to footage on the Attitude Era Podcast. And double up. You know what I mean? It's an idea Archie came up with a couple months ago, is where we take a wrestler, we take the good parts about the wrestler, we take the cons about him in two different promotions or two different characters they had, and then we decide which one is better. But today, being that Bret Hart's legendary career was mainly in WWF, we're not going to do the compare and contrast. We're just going to go with the things we liked about Bret Hart's career. And then we're going to talk about certain things that we didn't like and what we would like to have seen that did not happen with Bret Hart's career. And you know what I mean?
Don't need the clock today.
Archie, let's get into it.
All right. Okay. You want me to kick it off?
Yeah, you can kick it off, Archie.
Bret Hart in WWF, man. His whole career to me, man, as a kid, man, Bret Hart was cool. Like, he was a cool looking dude. I always wanted to be that kid in the front row that got the shades, but I never did. And look, if I ever get the opportunity, shade me, bro. I'm gonna be 8-year-old Archie. Shade me, bro. But yeah, Bret Hart was cool. What I loved about Bret Hart is he's tied to some of the biggest moments and biggest things in wrestling. You can't mention wrestling without Bret Hart. You can't mention WWF without Bret Hart. You can't mention titles without Bret Hart. You can't mention a lot without talking about Bret Hart. I love Bret Hart in the ring, what he did, even the commercials he did. Like, he was wrestling. I know a lot of times we talk about the Hogans and the Flairs, but Bret Hart was that gap in between the 80s, 90s into the Attitude Era. And you know what I'm saying? He tapped into a little bit of that on the interview. But Bret Hart, man, he just was cool. And he could wrestle. He could wrestle. I love Bret Hart. I love the Hart Foundation. I wanted to go to the dungeon. I wanted Stu to put me in a sleeper hole. I ain't gonna hold you, but it goes on. We could talk about Bret Hart's career forever, but I mean, I'm just a fan, and I'm honored that he's on our podcast. And I don't know how you did the interview, DNA, because it's a few people that I would have fanned out over, and I'm telling you, you would have thought Michael Jackson walked in the room. I would have fanned out over Bret Hart. So you held your composure. Interview was fire. I mean, I'm sure y'all gonna cover more about Bret Hart, but for me, it was the coolness factor, it's the legacy factor, it's the history factor, and you can't mention wrestling without mentioning the best there is, the best there was, and the best there ever will be. So,
Archie, just to piggyback off of what you said, remember, that's not my first time meeting him. Right? I done met Bret Hart about 3 or 4 times now. I did the segment. I didn't even mention that to him, that I did the segment on House of Glory in the ring with him. So that was my first time meeting him, and I actually worked with him the first time I met him. So that was amazing. And then I seen him again at 80s and 90s con, and then I think I seen him somewhere else. So it was like I had 3, interactions with him before doing the interview. But yeah, for me, I mean, doing the interview was just an honor to be in the presence of somebody that was one of my favorites, a wrestler that I grew up wrestling. In my opinion, I feel like what made Bret Hart so special is that Bret Hart is like an anomaly. I feel like in sports and entertainment, you rarely get that person that transcends and goes very far just strictly based off a skill set. Usually it's something else that carries them over the top, personality, controversy, those extra things. With Bret Hart, I feel like Bret Hart was where Bret Hart was at because he's like one of the best technical wrestlers the game has to offer. And anytime it was controversy or it was, because he does have a personality, but it was real. So that's the crazy thing, like how a lot of people see his personality in storylines. You didn't get that from him. When it was a storyline, he's just doing his job. But when it was real, that's the highlight. Like the Montreal screw job is real. You know what I mean? Like him with Goldberg, it's real. Him with Eric Bischoff, it's real. So anytime you got that, it was like literally, and he said that in the interview. He said that he was the guy that was like, I want to sit when I do a wrestling match or I'm in the ring, I'm the kid that's front row. What would I like to see? So that's what he would like to deliver. I mean, and I feel like just everything he stood for outside of wrestling is why I gravitated him a lot, even in terms of family. Like you don't like he put his whole family on. You know what I mean? He worked with his brother. He worked with his brother-in-law. He worked with his other brother by marriage. Like it was all family orientated. Like even that's what I mean about authenticity. Like even his group wasn't just a faction that's made up. Everybody in the Hart Foundation was related to him. So I just like the transparency with his career, and I liked his passion, because you could just look at somebody and tell when they really love it. Like some people stumble upon things because that's just something they good at or something somebody suggested them to do. But even when we did the interview with him at the age of almost 70 years old now, you can still hear, even though some people may look at it as disgruntledness or bitterness. No, it's somebody that's passionate about what they did, and they feel like when you passionate, you gonna if you feel like you was done in the wrong way, that's gonna stick with you forever because you got so much love for the art. So that's really what I mean. I don't think nobody ever gave that take. They'll just talk about the moves, but the person is why what I mean. I gravitated to Bret Hart a lot.
Mm.
Yeah, your turn.
Yeah, that's a lot. For me personally, I think that a good word to use for Bret Hart is the prototype. He becomes the prototype wrestler for which being a great professional wrestler is measured. And I say that because he is like on paper, people just put titles and stuff. But if you watch his career, there is none like it. So he starts off with the Hart Foundation with his brother-in-law, right? They become greats, and they're not the biggest tag team. This is the '80s where you got like Legion of Doom, and you got all these bigger tag teams, Warlord and Barbarian, and Anvil's got some size, and then Bret's the small guy, and they are like mainstays. They are like main eventing events as tag teams, and they're just putting on a show. He doesn't have a bad breakup, but then he goes singles, right? And then he does the mid tier thing with some of the best in the business. And if you want to compare anyone to him on a mid tier level, man, he only has 2 championship runs at the IC. He main evented SummerSlam as the Intercontinental Champion for the Intercontinental Championship. Ain't nobody else done that for the mid card title, like at all. Bret Hart did with his brother-in-law. So that at Wembley Stadium, you know what I mean? Like that is crazy in and of itself, right? Then on
What
top of
is
that,
it? What is it, HB?
my brain is buffering. You know what I'm saying? Crazy. Like it's unheard of, and it still ain't happened since. So that's how crazy, you know what I'm saying, we're talking. So then they're like, well, he's breaking out from the big guy era too. He's like one of the first of his kind in WWE. You have Ric Flair and but in WWE, if you ain't about 300, 290, you
Yeah,
ain't it.
yeah.
But Bret breaks that. And he puts on. He puts on. He goes against Ric Flair. He has Yokozuna. He has some of the top rivalries in history. He like even a guy like Jerry the King Lawler. Remember he used to say all that stuff about his moms. Bret is becomes the world champion, and then like you say, he puts his family on. He does the unfortunate things is like the Montreal screw job and stuff. But Bret is what a wrestler should be. His matches tell stories. he also gave everybody shots. He has battles with the 1-2-3 Kid for the world title, battles with Virgil, but then in the main events of major cards, it's Diesel, Yokozuna. And all his matches are great. So
Bret Hart.
it's Bret Hart. Like, people don't really get it, bro. And it's almost like I hate to see him leave because when he goes to WCW, it's just because it's more of an
We're
emotional.
gonna get there. We're gonna get there. We're gonna get there.
But
Look, like
as
I
far
said,
as
we could talk all night about the
you're right.
positives, but unfortunately, not unfortunately, the show Double Up is we talk pros, we talk cons, and
There you go.
we just not on the clock this week because it's Bret Hart appreciation, and we got the GOAT on Attitude Errors. Unfortunately, I got to get into the flip side. The cons for me, I know y'all gonna mention, Montreal screw job. I know y'all gonna mention Owens passing. My biggest thing that I didn't like, I'm gonna say I didn't like the way the wrestling business treated Bret Hart. I've always said he's a good example of sometimes the thing you love don't always love you back. And that makes me sad because Bret Hart, he was a lifer to WWF and loyal to Vince. He had a crazy, weird contract. I said he was a part of some of the biggest moments, but also some of the biggest, baddest moments. Like I said, we're gonna get into it. Montreal Screwjob, Owens passing, even after his retirement happened because something in the ring. And even him getting attacked at the Hall of Fame is like, that's random as hell. Like, why did that even happen to Bret Hart? It's just those things are attached to his career, unfortunately, and those are the things people might mention right off top because and I know it had to be hard for him, but you can't wrestle and not think about your brother passing. You know what I'm saying? You can't go certain places and not think about what happened in these buildings and these arenas. And I think that's just the wrestling business. That's the only con I have because in the ring, I mean, you can't find flaws in his game or his repertoire. But I wish the wrestling business would have loved him as much as he loved wrestling.
Well said.
Well, it's crazy, Archie, when you say that, man. I was there the day at the Hall of Fame joint.
Were you?
Yeah. I seen it happen.
I still don't know how and why that happened.
Bro, I was there with my stepson, and he was young at the time, and he was like, "Oh man, this storyline is crazy." I said, "Yo, this ain't no storyline, man." Bret Hart at the time, God willing, Bret Hart had just had a stroke, so I'm like, "Nah, I know this ain't the storyline. This is a nut." They beat the brakes off of him though. That's what people didn't see on
he deserved it. It was my I think Dax and
he was
FTR
knotted
went
up.
crazy on him. Yeah,
he was knotted up, leaking and all that. Everybody from backstage came out when they cut the went to commercial. They beat the brakes off of him. But nonetheless, I agree with you with that. I just also feel like it's like the sad part about having so much talent and being skilled is that I feel like that was the time in life where it stopped being about that. Because you got to think now that I'm older and I could really process what was happening. This is the Attitude Era podcast. We infatuated with the Attitude Era, but the Attitude Era was basically, Vince Russo said it. It was the Jerry Springer and the Maury show combined into wrestling. So it was about drama. It was more entertainment based. And I feel like that's only way Bret became successful, and it sucks that your talent can't just get you far in life, was if he went off of real emotion. Because storyline wise, I feel like that's why Vince did that. Like, okay, there's so many other larger than life personalities coming in now, and we have this guy that's good, but that's where the margin is drawn. And I feel like I could agree with Archie that my con is, I feel like from the end of the WWF run to the whole WCW run, that's not how you treat somebody of that caliber and that stature. Like, you put a stain on his career because he doesn't own a wrestling company. So he can't, you know what I mean? At that point, he can't have control of his career because somebody, like, you know what I mean? He's not booking the matches. So yeah, I would agree. That kind of definitely, because there's certain people that now we got to tell the story of Bret Hart. Certain people just know a younger generation, they just know the Montreal screw job.
Right.
They don't know the pain, that was put in before that, because the most old era in wrestling that's talked about is the Attitude Era, and it's like he left right before that happened. So yeah.
HP.
Yeah, I definitely agree. I do think for me, my con, it's kind of weird, right? I look at it as the credit he deserves is the con, right? Because for some reason he gets bypassed on a lot of things that he either ushered in, started, or created. Like, I'll just be transparent, right? You watch this Drew McIntyre saga, and all this Drew, I got screwed week after week is like super reminiscent of Brett cutting these same very similar promos. And that's the first of its kind because Brett was really getting like the short end of the stick week after week. And it just, he couldn't he really ushers in the attitude like DX. We talk about DX, everyone loves DX, but the guy who calls them and names DX, and honestly, he's like pretty responsible for DX is Bret Hart. He calls them degenerates. And when they can't respond to it in a quick quip, he's like, oh, we're degenerates. You think you're a degenerate? I think I'm a degenerate. We're Degeneration X. You know what I mean? Like, it came off of Bret Hart. And it was a response to Bret Hart putting together the Hart Foundation. So that, and then, his emotional run into WCW. I think he would have just started out. I've heard Vince say about Shawn wouldn't like it there because it's the creative control. Not even that, just like they won't let you be free and they won't let your talent like really shine. Brett is the same guy, but the first version of this. Brett needs to be able to shine, and he can shine with anybody. You just got to give him those opportunities. And WCW, they just throw him in the mid tier, just throw him with this guy, just put on Nitro with no promo, him versus Sting. You know what I mean? Like, what the hell? Hey, let Bret Hart sit home week after week. So it just not his fault, and it's not even his fault. It's but
The
the
wrestling
emotional,
business was not good to Bret Hart.
right?
So,
But
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 you
you
speaking of,
imagine after you say all of that, when people are watching now, like, how do you want somebody not to have a disdain or be like, yo, what's so crazy? One misconception in life is people act like it's not okay to be upset about something. Like all those things we saying, when you see him on camera and he talks about it, most of the comments, Bret Hart is bitter. Bret Hart, you wouldn't be? You wouldn't be if you are this great at doing something and you feel like you are a legend. You are on some people's Mount Rushmore. You are top 5, but imagine what it would have been if certain things would have happened. That's going to always, I mean, I don't know. Me as an artist, that's always going to be like, yo, man, I'm going to just feel away about it.
I watched the interview, and I guess we can talk a little bit about it. And it's certain things he talk about, and you can see him going right back to those exact moments.
Yeah.
His face changes, a little twinkle in his eye, and some things he did that I'm sure if he got to do it again, he would do it again. It's certain things he mentioned I never knew. Who knew that after a 20, 30-year career, it's still new information that you still have. That's why the interviews, that we do, we have a whole playlist of them. They're important because when these guys go, unfortunately, they transition, they pass away, all the stories and knowledge and everything go with them. So to hear Brett talk about Owen is refreshing. You know what I mean? You got some good stuff out of him, DNA. Hear about the insights.
But what I like though with us is that you got 5 wrestling minds that are sitting there putting those questions together. No knock to the other pods, but a lot of other pods is one person. So that's what one person would want to know. You know what I mean? Like, here you got something Archie wants to know, something Jerry wants to know, something Gamad Z wants to know, DNA wants to know. So when you put all that together, then we filtering to where it's like, that's why even how I asked them, you know what I mean? I'm not going to give y'all the answer away, but even how I asked them about the Montreal screw job, we got something new from it because
that's what I'm saying. You wouldn't think
in a typical way. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
hey, man, the Montreal screw job, do you think it was right? Like, we already know how you feel about that. It's like, boom, we want to know you know what I mean, this
And
far.
what's crazy about that is this is actually in our interview, but on another interview, the Undertaker just recently mentioned the Montreal screw job, and Bret kind of responded to that in our interview.
Yeah.
Yes.
So we got a lot out of Bret Hart, and I feel like if the Goldberg, I think that's the biggest beef with Goldberg is he had a lot left to give that he wanted to give, because like I say, when he talking about certain things in his interview, I seen him light up. I was like, oh, he still want to
Ready.
go. And then the dream match he mentioned, he said he would have the best 90 minutes. Man, look, the interview was fire. I'm not just gassing it up, but like I said, just getting new information from somebody that's been telling this story for 20 years means, one, they enjoy talking to us, and two,
No, I was gonna say he also said at the end of the interview, like, and I'm not going to toot our own horn or nothing, but I get that a lot. A lot of people at the end of the interview be like, "Yo, this was a really good interview." And
that's what I think people like about this podcast. It's like just talking to your homies, right? It's not a script. We just talking, but we talking about something we like and enjoy. But again, that interview, man, he mentioned things I personally might have tiptoed around certain things that you didn't, and he got right into it. I just know I got to see a side of Bret Hart from this interview that I never seen before. Like you mentioned, the person. Bret Hart stood on business before standing on business was a thing.
Oh no, for sure.
And that's what got him jammed up. And he talked about it in the interview. He was like,
but you know what's crazy? We talk about the Attitude Era, right? Bret Hart kind of ushers that in. He also forces Vince McMahon to no longer be a commentator. Like, it's Bret that does that.
He's responsible for a lot.
It's Bret with the.
You know what he also said on a podcast, and we're gonna let it fly just so y'all can know what type of time he was on. He said there would be no Attitude Era if it wasn't for Bret Hart.
He said they try to act like I wasn't there.
Yeah,
I ain't gonna hold you. There's no disagreement for that.
That's HP's argument. He always said, I always say he created the Mr. McMahon character, but HP always says the match, all that stuff was the beginning of the Attitude Era. Yeah. And
after you got to think after that, Vince McMahon did the PSA saying we are ushering a new era. The Attitude Era.
And that's when he stops commentating too. Like everything changes. The whole landscape changes.
What I would wanted to have seen, obviously,
this is bullshit. Like
obviously, I would want to have seen a continuation of Bret Hart and Shawn Michaels feud, but now more so with DX and Hart Foundation. Now that was building up, I would wanted to have seen Bret Hart and The Rock. I know that would have been something special. Bret Hart and Kurt Angle. You know what I mean? Right. Bret Hart and Stone Cold after he turned into Stone Cold, because I mean he helped them get there, but that's a whole different.
We would have probably even got the dream match he mentioned that he wanted to have. Yeah. So
I almost said it.
Nah, we ain't gonna no spoilers, but
absolutely not.
Bret,
I mean, even if he's around when WCW comes over, just to see the Hart Foundation feud with NWO, like it was so many things, or that could have happened in WCW. Like it was a lot. There's a lot that was left on the table, man. But
that's what I'm saying. I think, and that's the sad part, because he loves wrestling, and like I said, I watched the interview a couple of times, so it's I see the twinkle in his eye, man, and he's the things he did. He's proud that he did them. Like I said, he stood on business and he knew what he was doing. He's proud of what he did, and I think, and I also got that he might not be as tight. I mean, as upset about Shawn, because he gave Shawn props. Like this interview is
that right there. That's my number one thing that I always say to all people. I have a high respect for any individual if they can separate their emotions from the art. You can tell me you don't like a person, but then don't not give that person their flowers.
Credit. And he did, like I said, Bret.
Because then I feel like you tampered with. Then I can't take nothing you say has validity. If you can't separate your personal feeling from if a product is good or bad, then you know what I mean, your standard is not there. And once he did that, I was like, yeah, this guy, he's the real deal, man.
It's still fuck Vince though.
Understandable. Understandable. But look, y'all, we ain't gonna take too much of your time out. This Sunday, 3 p.m. Eastern Time on the Attitude Era podcast. You can go watch the whole interview yourself. Y'all can see we not capping with none of the things that we're talking about. Is stories, is things being said that have not been said on any other podcast. So please tune in this Sunday on the Attitude Era podcast so you can see the Bret Hart interview for yourself. It is going down. It is going to be crazy. And I'm calling it out there already. We're going viral, man.
And if you watch this after the interview, come back and tell us that we was lying. In the comment. That's what the comments for.
But you know what's crazy? I think after they watch this interview and then come back and rewatch this video, it's like a highlighter over words. You know what I'm saying? It's gonna really like, oh snap, yeah, they was.
And you know why? Because Attitude Era podcast is the best there is, the best there was, and the best there ever will be. You heard?